Democrats who attended a secret Hill briefing about America's plans in Iran have walked away feeling like there's no endgame, no clearly communicated goals, and no hope that this will help Americans or people in Iran. Since Trump's administration launched strikes against Iran, killing its supreme leader without congressional approval, oversight, or a clear plan of action, Americans and their representatives have been scrambling for answers. But according to Senator Elizabeth Warren and some other Democrats who were present at this secret meeting, it's even worse than we think. Last weekend, the US partnered with Israel to launch a series of strikes on Iran that Americans had no warning would happen, and neither did Congress. Now, Democrats are pushing for answers in closed door meetings, but according to Senator Elizabeth Warren, it's even worse on the inside than it looks on the outside. Here's what she came to social media to say afterward.
I just left a classified briefing on Iran, and here's what I can say. It is so much worse than you thought. You are right to be worried. Trump administration has no plan in Iran. This illegal war is based on lies, and it was launched without any imminent threat to our nation. Donald Trump still hasn't given a single clear reason for this war, and he seems to have no plan for how to end it either. Like a lot of you, I am really angry. I am angry at what Donald Trump is doing, and I feel grief for those already killed in this unnecessary conflict. And I will keep doing everything I can to fight to end this war.
Sometimes, when these types of closed door meetings happen on Capitol Hill, lawmakers come out on the other side and tell their constituents that they have learned important information that can help justify even controversial policies. I'm thinking about a couple years ago when Congress was attempting to ban TikTok, and some representatives said they had learned pretty disturbing details about China's potential surveillance through the app. But even then, these types of confidential meetings can raise a lot more questions than they answer. And right now, it seems like there's no answers. Elizabeth Warren isn't the only person talking about this who was present at this meeting. The Daily Beast reports that Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego, who is an Iraq war veteran, told CNN that Monday's briefing with Secretary of State Marco Rubio revealed the Trump administration has no clear exit strategy for its war with Iran. The most important thing that came away from this was number one, we don't have a plan on how to get out of this. He continued on to say, we don't actually have a concept of victory. Our justification for going into the war is entirely different from what we're hearing from the president right now. Again, this is even after the president went publicly and spoke to that. And that all is a very scary situation. Like for me, as someone who had to live through some really bad decisions in 2005, that, the then administration did, if we don't know how we can get out of this war, if we don't know what the actual victory is, we're seeing potentially a long term war. The Daily Beast goes on to say, he added, the president has not been very clear how and when it ends. And more importantly, the American public does not want this right now. That's reflected in what we've seen both publicly from the Trump administration, or a lack thereof, as well as what polling suggests about how Americans are feeling about these strikes. Typically, public sentiment for wartime activities starts at its highest position and then falls over the course of a war or a military intervention. But in this case, these strikes have already proven to be unpopular among a majority. The only place for that sentiment to go now is further down. And with no clear plan for what America is doing right now, it's clear that the public sentiment will reflect that, especially because Trump thus far has only contradicted himself and the reasons he says the US partook in these strikes at all. Plus, in a similar fashion to the way Americans reacted to the horrifying footage out of Gaza over the past 3 years, people are again horrified to see the impacts of these brutal strikes against civilians and children, like the dozens of young girls who were killed when an airstrike hit their school just a few days ago. The Daily Beast goes on to report, since launching major combat operations against Iran, which saw Iran's supreme leader and dozens of Iranian officials killed just in the opening days, Trump's public explanations for why the strikes were ordered and how long they might last have contradicted themselves. He said it might just be a few days, it might be well over a month. The timeline keeps shifting. And since this started, at least 6 US service members have already been killed in retaliatory attacks. In a letter sent to Congress by Trump, he even said he doesn't know the full scope of military operations in Iran. Quote, although the United States desires a quick and enduring peace, it is not possible at this time to know the full scope and duration of military operations that may be necessary. This is after Trump ran on a campaign that promised to end forever wars. And a lot of MAGA members who supported Trump said that Kamala Harris would be responsible for sending people's sons to the front lines if she were to win the presidency. But instead, the opposite is happening, which is why a lot of people in the MAGA universe have split from Trump over this. You have people like Nick Fuentes, an incel influencer, saying to vote for Democrats instead of Trump because of this war in Iran. I think the reality is anybody who's MAGA, anybody who pushes incel rhetoric and alt right viewpoints is not to be trusted. But you can see this schism that's emerging among Trump's own base over how messy, unplanned, and needlessly fatal this military intervention has already become. Senator Brian Schatz, a Democrat from Hawaii, said, we remain as confused as the American people are. The Daily Beast reported that he told reporters, there are times when you go into a classified session and you walk out with a better understanding about the gravity of the situation and the rationale behind the military action. This is not one of those times. They have had 3 or 4 or 5 justifications for this act of war over the last 4 or 5 days, and nothing in this classified session alleviated that confusion. Now, going back to my TikTok example, there were a lot of classified meetings happening around the government's insistence that TikTok needed to be banned because it posed a national security risk. Now, a lot of people, myself included, would argue that those efforts ultimately put more power in the hands of the Trump administration since their conservative allies were ultimately able to buy TikTok. But nonetheless, the fact that there is no plan whatsoever in these classified meetings betrays the entire purpose for them. It's like a show for the American people where we assume that because Congress is being told things in private, that must mean that there is some kind of rationale or some kind of plan for this military intervention. But the reality is, there is none. They can't even create a fake justification for this war or a plan that sounds kind of good or present any information that scares these Congress people into thinking we need to do this. The reality is that they're trying to come up with a rationale after the strikes already occurred. And that is not going to cut it as an explanation, not for the American people, and certainly not for the people of Iran. Their Monday briefing, the Daily Beast reports, is in part due to concerns that Congress will turn against them. And when it comes to the Democrats, that's already happening, and this meeting did nothing to quell those feelings. Afterwards, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut said, I'm more convinced now that this is going to be open ended and forever. This feels like a multi-trillion-dollar open-ended conflict with a very confusing and constantly shifting set of goals. Marco Rubio has already indicated that Israel is leading the way on this. He told reporters, we knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties. But the Daily Beast also reports that there was never any evidence this was going to happen. Trump's justification is that Iran was preparing to launch an unprovoked attack on US forces or was building missiles capable of reaching US soil. But none of that is backed by any evidence in official intelligence assessments. And this rationale sounds all too familiar. You have senators hearkening back to the Iraq War and the failed justification for that. This idea that these countries have weapons that are capable of hurting the United States, so we need to go after them first. This is a line used recently in US military history, and it's only led to more bloodshed, not more safety for Americans. Trump even said when he addressed the American people after launching these strikes that some of us might have to die for this war. So, what exactly is the protection here? There is none. There is no real justification. According to the best information we have right now, the US just chose to follow Israel's lead. That is not going to be a popular course of action, considering that a slim majority in the US now does not stand behind continued military intervention on behalf of Israel. That even includes Trump's own base. The American people don't want to go to war right now in general. They certainly don't want the justification for that war to be because of Israel, who people don't support after watching the carnage and devastation happening in Gaza over the past several years. Trump certainly isn't making any of this sound better. In his usual fashion, he's repeatedly contradicting himself in public. People like to make fun of the way that Trump talks and how silly it is to hear him speak. But there's nothing funny about someone utterly nonsensical taking action that leads to dozens of people's deaths, which is exactly what's happening right now. The Daily Beast reports days after urging Iranians to rise up and reclaim their country with America's backing, Trump is now saying that this military intervention could ultimately leave them no better off, depending on who emerges to replace its supreme leader. He told reporters in the Oval Office, I guess the worst case would be we do this and somebody takes over who's as bad as the previous person, right? That could happen. We don't want that to happen. It would probably be the worst. You go through this, and in 5 years, you realize you put somebody in who's no better. He then went on to say most of the people that they had in mind to succeed the supreme leader are now dead. So there were a lot of people in Iran who initially celebrated the strike that killed the supreme leader. But with no clear plan for succession, things could actually get significantly worse in the region. And again, this shouldn't come as a surprise. This is the exact same pattern that has played out for decades now, thanks to US military intervention in the Middle East. The US comes in, drops bombs, kills people, kills civilians, leaves things worse than they were before we got there. I don't know why anyone would expect it to play out differently under someone like Donald Trump, who doesn't even know what's going on half of the time. This idea that Trump is saying we should have had a better plan in place, well, he's the chief executive. He's the president. He's the one who should have had a better plan in place. But it's clear now that there was no plan. And the consequences of this could far outlast Trump's presidency. We are staring right down the barrel of a gun that promises another forever war with Americans killed, billions of funds diverted that could have helped people in this country, and an endless list of broken promises during the Trump campaign. The problem is that people fell for his lies in the first place. After seeing what Trump did during his first term, after seeing how nonsensical and idiotic he is on a regular basis, nobody should be surprised that this is the result of his needless, rushed out military plan. As Elizabeth Warren said, this is already an illegal war that was rushed through without any congressional oversight or approval. And this is exactly why those balances of power exist in the first place, to prevent things like this from happening. We just happen to have a mad king in office who steamrolls over checks and balances and nobody around to stop him. This is the result of Trump never being held accountable for breaking the law. He continues to escalate his violence, affecting people around the world and here at home. And what we're seeing on the ground in Iran is not exactly promising. Instead, we're seeing scenes like this. So, as the Associated Press reports, what we just saw in that clip were thousands of Iranian government supporters who filled the main square in the central city in mourning on Sunday after US and Israeli strikes killed the supreme leader of Iran. That's not representative of everyone in Iran. It's not even representative of the majority. But what it does show is that there's this massive group of people in Iran who are now in a state of unrest caused by the US's military intervention in the region, who are now screaming death to America, which I'm no expert, but is not like a great sign of what's to come. A new headline from the New York Times reads Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's son emerges as the leading choice to be a successor. That's the son of the supreme leader in Iran who the US just killed. So, as journalist Thor Benson posted on Blue Sky, it appears we may have replaced Ayatollah Khamenei with Ayatollah Khamenei. Or as writer Rusty Foster said, we also just murdered this guy's parents, his wife, and his son. So good luck getting a peace deal. And again, this harkens back to failed military interventions in the Middle East in the past. The US is repeating very recent history here, lessons that we should have learned from, but that we fundamentally can't learn from when you put someone like Donald Trump in office. I found this excerpt posted to Blue Sky really interesting. It says, if in a sizable population there are 100 rebels, all of whom are then rounded up and killed, the number of rebels present at the end of the day is not zero, and not even 100, but 200 or 300 or more. An equation based on human nature, which seems often to baffle the military and political mind. Essentially, when you intervene in another country, take out its existing leader, and lead no logical path to succession other than repeating more of the same, you aren't doing anything to make that country better or to protect anyone, least of all yourself. You're actually just making things worse, creating more unrest, creating a violent motive for potential retaliatory attacks, and you're creating a void of power that could be filled by anyone, including a more malicious, more violent, more repressive Iranian regime. The New York Times article goes on to report, if the supreme leader's son takes his place, supporters of the government would see him as a continuation of a ruler whom they view as martyred and will back him swiftly. But government opponents, too, will see him as a continuation of the regime, which in recent months has killed at least 7,000, a number that may well grow. You have another quote here that says, a portion of the public will react negatively and forcefully to this decision, and it will have a backlash. So anyone who cheered on Trump's decision to strike and the US military intervention because it removed the supreme leader and potentially opened the doorway for a better regime in Iran, well, that's not what happened. Instead, it left a power vacuum, one that will likely be a continuation of what was already happening and perhaps even an escalation. More brutality, more suppression. This could very easily be the consequences of the US's decision making over the past week in Iran. And again, this should come as no surprise to anyone who's been paying attention, both to the way that Trump acts as a leader, his foreign policy, as well as the recent history we've seen in the US meddling in the Middle East. A leftist Israeli lawmaker who spoke to Democracy Now! Offered his own explanation for what the US and Israel are really seeking to get out of this military intervention, and it has nothing to do with bringing peace to people in Iran.
Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. As we continue to look at the U.S. and Israeli war on Iran and Iran's retaliation, we're joined by Ofer Kasif. He's a member of the Israeli Knesset and the leftist Hadash Ta'al coalition. He's been a vocal critic of the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. In October, he waved a sign reading "Recognize Palestine" during President Trump's address to the Knesset. He's been repeatedly suspended from the Knesset for his outspoken criticism of Israel's war on Gaza. Joining us now from the Israeli city of Rehovot, thank you so much for being with us. If you can respond to what's happening on the ground in Israel. I know that we could lose you at any point if you have to go into a shelter, but overall, the peace movement in Israel, how is it responding right now, with it coming very clear that Israel led this Israeli-U.S. attack on Iran with some support from Saudi Arabia, convincing Trump to do this preemptive attack?
Well, they call it a preemptive attack. Of course, it was premeditated, and the reason is not as they say. We all know that the real interests of the government of Israel and the government of the United States, like many others, is not really to save the Iranian people from the despotic, really suppressive regime, nor to prevent them for developing a nuclear weapon or the missile industry. The real interest is a political and economic interest, an imperialist interest as ever. And the other things that are presented as if they were the reasons are merely excuses. But the real interest of those governments, of those imperialists and their partners, is the real reason is simply to do whatever they can in order to achieve their own economic and political interests at the expense of the peoples. including the people of Iran and the people of Israel. Unfortunately, neither of them is really interested in our well-being or in the people of Iran or the American people in their own welfare and good. So, and that's the main issue. This is an imperialist aggression against the Iranian people. It's not against the regime. They want us to believe it's against the regime. It is against the people of Iran eventually. And history proves that. And we, in the anti-occupation, anti-genocide, peace movement in Israel, we know that it's very difficult now at the moment to take to the streets and to demonstrate because of the missiles and also because of the limitations posed by the government under the guise of emergency situation. But we know what is at stake. We know that the real interest of the governments are against the interest of the peoples, and we do whatever we can in order to protest and to stop this bloodshed.
So, some excellent points being made there, namely that these military interventions have nothing to do with making things better for everyday people on the ground. And through the impact of these bombings, killing children, destroying buildings, destroying homes, disrupting day to day life, we can see that impact play out. Another excellent point made here is that you can't protest your government if you have to stay inside because of bombings happening in the street. So at the end of the day, what we know now, this void of power, this likely succession plan that will put the regime right back into power, brutalities to come, as well as significant casualties to come from American soldiers, from people in both sides of the battle. There's no good reason for this war to take place and no rationale that can be explained to any members of Congress. This is yet another egotistical power grab coming from a commander in chief who has no idea what he's doing and is admitting that now in many ways now that the damage is done.